The wrench slipped from my greasy fingers as I heard the car doors slamming in my driveway. Through the garage window, I watched my wife Marta step out of her silver BMW, followed by some guy in an expensive suit I'd never seen before. She was laughing at something he'd said, that fake corporate laugh she'd perfected over the years. "I'm Jake Morrison, 45 years old, owner of Morrison's Pawn and Trade on the south side of town. 25 years ago, I married the most beautiful woman in Millbrook, back when she was just Marta Collins, a secretary at the local insurance office. Now she's some hotshot executive at Sterling and Associates, the biggest advertising agency in the state." "Jake!" Marta called out, her voice carrying that artificial sweetness she used when she wanted something. "Come meet someone important." I wiped my hands on an old rag and walked over, still wearing my grease-stained coveralls. The guy in the suit looked me up and down like I was something he'd scrape off his shoe. "Jake, this is Derek Sterling, my boss," Marta said, practically glowing. "Derek, this is my husband." Derek extended a manicured hand. "The famous Jake. Marta's told me so much about you." I shook his hand, noting how soft it was. "All good things, I hope." "Of course," he smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Listen, I have some exciting news. We're throwing a celebration party tomorrow night for Marta's promotion to senior vice president. It's also your anniversary, right? 25 years? We thought we'd combine the celebrations." I looked at Marta. This was the first I'd heard of any promotion. "That's great, honey. Congratulations." "Thanks," she said. But she was looking at Derek, not me. "It's at the Riverside Country Club, 7 o'clock. Black tie." Black tie. I owned exactly one suit, and it was 15 years old. "Sounds fancy." "Don't worry about Jake," Marta said to Derek, like I wasn't standing right there. "He cleans up nice when he has to." All. After they left to discuss business at some restaurant downtown, I stood in my garage, wondering when my wife had stopped looking at me the way she looked at her boss. The answer came to me pretty quickly. About 2 years ago, when she started working late every night and taking weekend business trips. I'm not stupid. I know what working late really means when your boss drives you home and walks you to the door at midnight. But I'd been pretending everything was fine because, well, what else do you do after 25 years? The next evening, I squeezed into my old suit and drove to the country club. The place was packed with Sterling and Associates people, all perfectly dressed, all talking about campaigns and clients and quarterly projections. I felt like a caveman at a wine tasting. Marta was holding court near the bar, surrounded by her work friends. She'd had her hair done and was wearing a dress that probably cost more than I made in a month. She looked stunning and completely out of my league. "Jake," a voice called out. I turned to see Tanya Walsh, Marta's best friend since college, approaching with a martini in her hand. "You must be so proud of Marta tonight." "Oh, yeah, she's really something," I said, watching my wife laugh at something Derek whispered in her ear. "She deserves this promotion," Tanya continued. "She's worked so hard, especially these past 2 years. All those late nights, weekend meetings, business dinners. Derek really sees her potential. I bet he does. She's definitely dedicated." "Oh, absolutely. You know, some wives might be jealous of how much time their husbands spend with attractive female colleagues, but Marta never complains about how much time Derek spends with her. She's very mature that way." I stared at Tanya. Was she actually telling me my wife was cheating on me at my own anniversary party? The smile on her face suggested she was enjoying every second of this. Before I could respond, Derek tapped his champagne glass with a knife. The room fell silent. "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us tonight to celebrate 2 very special occasions. First, Marta Morrison's well-deserved promotion to senior vice president, polite applause. And second, her 25th wedding anniversary, mid-20. More applause, though it seemed less enthusiastic. I noticed several people glancing between Marta and Derek with knowing looks. "Now, I have one more announcement," Derek continued. "Marta, could you join me up here?" My wife walked over, her face flushed with excitement. Derek took her hand, and to my complete shock, dropped to one knee. "Marta Morrison, you are the most brilliant, beautiful, amazing woman I've ever known. I can't imagine my life without you. Will you leave your husband and marry me?" The room went dead silent. I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. My wife of 25 years, was being proposed to by another man at our anniversary party, in front of 100 people. Marta looked stunned for about 3 seconds. Then she looked directly at me, and I saw something in her eyes I'd never seen before. Pity. "Yes," she said. "Yes, I will." The room erupted. Some people cheered, others gasped, a few looked uncomfortable. I just stood there, frozen, as my marriage officially ended in the most humiliating way possible. Derek slipped a ring on Marta's finger, a ring that probably cost more than my truck, and kissed her while everyone applauded. When they broke apart, Marta looked around the room like a queen surveying her subjects. Her eyes found mine across the crowd. Jake, I'm sorry you had to find out this way, but— No, no, I interrupted, walking toward them. This is perfect, really. What better way to end our marriage than with a public proposal from your boss? I picked up a champagne glass from a nearby table and raised it high. Ladies and gentlemen, a toast to true love. May it last longer than our mortgage payments. A few people laughed nervously. Marta's face went red. And Derek, I continued, congratulations on winning the prize. She's all yours now. The late nights, the mood swings, the credit card bills, the whole package. I hope you're ready for it. I drained the champagne and set the glass down hard enough that it cracked. Have a wonderful evening, everyone. I've got to get home and figure out how to explain to my kids that mommy's getting remarried. I walked out of that country club with whatever dignity I had left, but inside I was already planning. These people had humiliated me in the most public way possible. They thought I was just some dumb blue-collar guy who'd roll over and take it. They were about to learn how wrong they were. The next morning, I woke up on my couch with a hangover and a house that felt too quiet. Marta hadn't come home, which wasn't surprising. She was probably celebrating her engagement at Derek's mansion on the lake. My phone had 17 missed calls and 43 text messages. Most were from people who'd been at the party, offering sympathy or asking for details. A few were from my kids. Ross, my 22-year-old son, had texted, "Dad, what the hell happened? Mom won't answer her phone." Amelia, my 20-year-old daughter, was more direct. "Is it true Mom's marrying her boss? Everyone's talking about it on social media." Social media, of course. By now, the whole town probably knew about my public humiliation. I scrolled through Facebook and found at least a dozen posts about the party, complete with photos of Derek's proposal and my toast. The comments ranged from sympathetic to cruel. Poor Jake Morrison. Always knew Marta was too good for him. About time she upgraded. That pawn shop guy was holding her back. Saw this coming a mile away. She's been running around with Sterling for months. I threw my phone across the room and went to make coffee. Through the kitchen window, I could see Mrs. Platt, my 70-year-old neighbor, watering her garden while obviously trying to get a look into my house. When she saw me, she waved enthusiastically. Great. Even the neighborhood busybody was treating me like a zoo animal. Around noon, Eddie Kowalski showed up at my door with a six-pack of beer and a bag of takeout from Murphy's Deli. Eddie owns Kowalski's boxing gym downtown, where I've been working out since high school. He's been my best friend for 30 years, and he's seen me through every major crisis in my life. "Heard you had an interesting evening," he said, settling into my kitchen chair. "That's one way to put it." I opened a beer and took a long drink. "You should have seen it, Eddie. The whole thing was planned. Tanya was practically gloating about it." "Tanya Walsh? Marta's friend?" "Yeah. She made sure I knew all about the late nights and business dinners. She wanted me to know what was happening." Eddie shook his head. "That's cold, even for her. So what's your next move?" "I don't know. Divorce lawyer, I guess. Try to keep the house and the shop." "That's it? You're just going to roll over?" I looked at him. "What else am I supposed to do? Challenge Derek to a duel? I'm not talking about violence, Jake. I'm talking about making them pay for humiliating you like that. You think they're going to be satisfied with just taking your wife? They're going to come after everything. Your reputation, your business, your kids' respect. People like that don't know when to stop." He was right. I'd seen Derek's type before. Rich guys who came into my pawn shop thinking they could intimidate me into giving them better deals. They only respected strength. "What did you have in mind?" Eddie smiled. "You know what your problem is, Jake? You're too nice. You play by the rules while they cheat. Maybe it's time to level the playing field." That afternoon, I drove to my shop and tried to focus on work. But every customer who came in looked at me with either pity or amusement. Word had spread fast in a town like Millbrook. Around 4 o'clock, my son Ross showed up. He's a good kid, works construction, plays in a local band, still lives at home to save money. He looked angry. "Dad, I just came from Mom's office. She's not even trying to hide it anymore. She's got pictures of her and Sterling all over her desk." "Ross, no, let me finish. She told me you two are getting divorced and that I need to accept her new relationship. She said Sterling's going to be a better provider than you ever were." That stung. I'd worked 60-hour weeks for 25 years to give Marta and the kids everything they wanted. It was never enough. She also said I should move out of the house because Sterling doesn't want complications when they get married. She said, "What?" "Yeah. Apparently they want to sell this place and move into his mansion." She said I'm old enough to take care of myself. I felt something cold and hard settle in my chest. It was one thing to humiliate me, but trying to throw my kids out of their home, that crossed a line. "Don't worry about it, son. This is your home as long as you want it to be." "Thanks, Dad. And just so you know, Amelia feels the same way I do. We're on your side." After Ross left, I sat in my shop and thought about what Eddie had said. Maybe it was time to stop being nice. Maybe it was time to show Marta and Derek that the dumb pawn shop owner wasn't as helpless as they thought. I started making a list of everything I knew about them. Derek Sterling, 52 years old, divorced twice, owned Sterling and Associates and half a dozen other businesses around town, lived alone in a lakeside mansion, drove expensive cars, had a reputation as a playboy. Marta, my wife of 25 years, which meant I knew all her secrets, all her weaknesses, all her fears. She'd forgotten that in her rush to upgrade her life. And Tanya Walsh, Marta's best friend and biggest enabler. She ran some kind of consulting business that seemed to involve mostly gossip and social climbing. She'd been feeding Marta advice about improving herself for years. By the time I closed the shop that evening, I had the beginning of a plan. It wasn't going to be quick, and it wasn't going to be easy, but it was going to be thorough. They wanted to play games? Fine. But they were about to learn that I'd been underestimated my whole life, and that was my biggest advantage. The war was just beginning. 2 days after the Anniversary disaster, I was reorganizing inventory in my shop when the bell above the door chimed. I looked up to see Derek Sterling walking in, wearing a $1,000 suit and looking around like he'd stepped in something unpleasant. "Jake, right? We need to talk." I set down the box of old jewelry I'd been sorting. "About what?" "About making this transition as smooth as possible for everyone involved. Marta and I want to handle the divorce amicably." "How considerate of you both." He missed the sarcasm entirely. "Look, I know this is awkward, but we're all adults here. I'm prepared to be generous. I'll make sure you keep this shop and get enough money to start over somewhere else." "Somewhere else?" "Well, yes. Millbrook's a small town, and this situation is going to be uncomfortable for everyone if we're all living here. Fresh start, new opportunities. It could be good for you." I studied his face. He actually believed he was being reasonable. "And if I don't want to leave?" His expression hardened slightly. "Jake, let's be honest. Marta's moved on. She's building a new life with someone who can provide for her properly. Fighting it will only make things harder on your kids." "My kids? They're adults now. They need to think about their futures. I have connections all over the state. I could help Ross find better work, maybe get Amelia an internship at a good company. But that depends on how cooperative you are." The threat was subtle, but clear. "Play along, or your kids suffer." "I'll think about it," I said. "Good. I knew you'd be reasonable." He headed for the door, then turned back. "Oh, and Jake? Marta asked me to tell you she'll be by this weekend to get the rest of her things. She'd prefer if you weren't there." After he left, I called Eddie. "That bastard just threatened my kids." I told him what had happened. "See? I told you they wouldn't stop. They want you gone completely. Out of town, out of their lives, out of the picture. What are you going to do about it?" "I'm going to give them what they want, sort of." That weekend, while Marta was at the house packing her things, I was at the gym working out my frustration on a heavy bag. Eddie was holding pads for me, calling out combinations. "Jab, cross, hook, again." "You're still thinking too much, Jake. When you're in a fight, you don't think, you react." I threw the combination harder. "I'm not planning to fight anybody, Eddie. I'm not talking about physical fighting. I'm talking about the other kind, mental warfare. You need to start thinking like them. 2 steps ahead, always looking for the advantage." He was right. I'd been reactive my whole marriage, always responding to Marta's demands instead of making my own plans. Time to change that. "What do you know about Sterling's business?" I asked. "Advertising agency, right? Handles a lot of the big accounts in town. The car dealerships, the hospital, couple of restaurants. Why?" "Just curious about how he makes his money." Eddie lowered the pads and looked at me. "Jake, whatever you're planning, be careful. Guys like Sterling have lawyers and connections. They can make life difficult for people like us." "Let me worry about that." Monday morning, I drove to the public library, and spent 3 hours researching Derek Sterling and his businesses. What I found was interesting. Sterling and Associates had grown rapidly over the past 5 years, acquiring smaller agencies and landing major contracts. But there were also some complaints filed with the Better Business Bureau, clients claiming overcharging, missed deadlines, poor service. More interesting was Sterling's personal life. 2 expensive divorces, several lawsuits from former business partners, and rumors of financial problems despite his flashy lifestyle. The mansion on the lake was mortgaged to the hilt, and he'd recently sold his yacht and vacation home in Florida. Derek Sterling was living beyond his means, and Marta was his ticket to respectability and financial stability. Her salary as senior VP would help shore up his finances, and being married to someone with a clean reputation would help his business image. But what if that reputation got damaged? I spent the next week gathering information. I talked to former clients of Sterling's agency, visited businesses that had worked with him, and even struck up conversations with people who lived near his mansion. Small towns are great for gossip if you know how to listen. What I learned was that Derek Sterling was not well liked. He was arrogant, demanding, and had a reputation for taking credit for other people's work. Several of his employees had quit in the past year, including 2 senior account executives who'd started their own competing agency. Even better, I discovered that Marta's promotion had caused resentment at Sterling and Associates. She'd been there less than 3 years, but had been promoted over people with seniority. The rumor was that she was sleeping her way to the top, which was basically true. All of this gave me ideas, but I needed to be smart about it. Direct confrontation wouldn't work. Sterling had too much money and influence. I needed to be subtle, patient, and strategic. I started small. Anonymous tips to the Better Business Bureau about Sterling's billing practices. Casual conversations with his competitors about his vulnerabilities. A few well-placed comments on social media reviews of his agency. Nothing traceable, nothing illegal, just little pinpricks designed to make his life slightly more difficult. But the real opportunity came when Ross told me something interesting. "Dad, you know that charity boxing match at Eddie's gym next month? Guess who signed up to participate?" "Who?" "Sterling. Apparently he's trying to show what a regular guy he is. Going to spar with some local businessmen for charity." I smiled. Derek Sterling wanted to play boxer? Perfect. I knew exactly how to handle that. The charity boxing event at Eddie's gym was supposed to be a friendly competition between local businessmen to raise money for the youth center. Derek had signed up as a way to show the community what a regular guy he was, despite living in a lakeside mansion and driving cars worth more than most people's houses. I wasn't originally planning to participate, but when Eddie mentioned that Sterling had specifically asked if that pawn shop guy would be there, I decided to enter at the last minute. "You sure about this, Jake?" Eddie asked as he wrapped my hands before the match. "This is supposed to be friendly." "Don't worry, I'm not going to hurt him much." The gym was packed with local business owners, their families, and curious spectators who'd heard about the drama between Sterling and me. I could see Marta in the crowd, looking nervous. Tanya was beside her, whispering something that made Marta shake her head. Sterling was in the opposite corner, wearing brand new boxing gear that still had price tags. His trainer was some kid who worked at the country club, not exactly qualified to prepare someone for even a friendly match. The referee, Eddie's nephew Mike, called us to the center of the ring. "Gentlemen, this is 3 rounds, light contact only. We're here to raise money for charity, not settle personal disputes." Sterling looked confident as he bumped gloves with me. "May the best man win, Jake." "Already did," I replied. The bell rang, and Sterling came out aggressive, trying to land big shots that would impress the crowd. But he was telegraphing every punch, leaving himself wide open. I slipped his first swing easily and popped him with a light jab to the nose. He stumbled back, surprised. The crowd murmured. "Easy there, champ," I said. "It's just charity." Sterling's face reddened. He came forward again, this time more cautiously. I let him throw a few punches that barely grazed me, then stepped inside and landed a body shot just hard enough to make him grunt. "You okay?" I asked, loud enough for the crowd to hear. "We can slow it down if you need a break." That did it. Sterling lost his temper and started throwing wild haymakers, trying to take my head off. But anger makes you sloppy, and I'd been boxing since I was 15. I slipped his punches easily, making him look foolish as he swung at air. In the second round, I decided to end the show. Sterling threw a looping right hand that missed by 6 inches. I stepped inside, grabbed him in a clinch, and whispered in his ear, "Enjoying married life so far? Wait until you see what comes next." His eyes went wide. I pushed him away and landed a clean jab to his mouthguard, snapping his head back. The crowd cheered. Sterling was breathing hard now, his expensive gear soaked with sweat. He looked over at Marta, who was watching with obvious embarrassment. Having fun yet? I asked as we circled each other. He tried one more desperate combination, but his arms were tired and his form was terrible. I slipped the punches and countered with a light hook to his ribs that made him drop his guard. The bell rang, ending the round. In the third round, Sterling could barely lift his arms. I took it easy on him, just moving around and making him miss while the crowd watched him get thoroughly outclassed by the dumb pawn shop owner. When the final bell rang, Sterling was leaning against the ropes, gasping for air. I walked over and offered my hand. "Good fight," I said loud enough for everyone to hear. "You've got heart." He shook my hand reluctantly, his face red with exertion and humiliation. The crowd applauded politely, but everyone could see who had dominated the match. As we left the ring, I caught Marta's eye. She looked angry and embarrassed. Good. Let her see what her new fiancé looked like when he was challenged by a real man. In the locker room afterward, Sterling was sitting on a bench, still breathing hard. His fancy trainer had disappeared. "Hell of a workout," I said, toweling off. "You should come by the gym more often. Eddie could teach you a lot." "Stay away from me, Morrison," he muttered. "This is a public gym, Derek. I've been coming here for 30 years. You're the newcomer." He stood up, trying to look intimidating despite the fact that he could barely stand straight. "This isn't over. You're right about that." As I was leaving the gym, Tanya Walsh approached me in the parking lot. She was alone. Marta had apparently left with Sterling. "That was quite a performance in there, Jake. Just a friendly charity match." "Right." She smiled that cold smile I'd seen at the anniversary party. "You know, Marta's worried about you. She thinks you're not handling the divorce well." "I'm handling it fine." "Are you? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you're trying to embarrass her new fiancé in public. That's not very mature." I studied Tanya's face. There was something else there, something I hadn't noticed before. She was enjoying this, not just Marta's affair, but the whole messy situation. "Why do you care so much about Marta's love life, Tanya? She's my best friend. I want her to be happy." "Is that all?" Her smile faltered slightly. "What's that supposed to mean?" "Nothing. Just seems like you're awfully invested in breaking up my marriage." "Your marriage was over long before Derek came along, Jake." Marta just finally found the courage to admit it. Courage? That's an interesting word for it. Tanya's eyes narrowed. "Be careful, Jake. You're not as smart as you think you are." As she walked away, I realized something important. Tanya wasn't just Marta's friend. She was the architect of this whole situation. She'd been pushing Marta towards Sterling, encouraging the affair, probably even helping arrange their secret meetings. But why? What did Tanya Walsh have to gain from destroying my marriage? That was a question I needed to answer before I made my next move. 3 weeks after the boxing match, I was closing up the pawn shop when my daughter Amelia burst through the door, tears streaming down her face. "Dad, we need to talk." I locked the door and flipped the sign to closed. "What's wrong, sweetheart?" "It's Mom and Tanya. I found out something horrible." She pulled out her phone and showed me a series of text messages. They were between Marta and Tanya, dating back almost 2 years. "How did you get these?" "Mom left her old phone at the house when she moved out. I was going to give it back, but it kept buzzing with old messages syncing from the cloud." I read through the messages, my anger growing with each one. They detailed the entire affair, how Tanya had introduced Marta to Sterling at a business conference, encouraged her to pursue him, even helped arrange their secret meetings. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was what they said about me and the kids. "Jake's getting suspicious. Maybe we should slow down, Marta. Don't be weak. He's too stupid to figure it out. And even if he does, what's he going to do? He needs you more than you need him, Tanya. What about Ross and Amelia? They're adults. They'll get over it. Besides, Sterling's connections will be better for their careers than anything Jake could provide. I feel guilty about the anniversary party idea. It's perfect, public, humiliating, final. He'll be so shocked he won't fight the divorce, trust me." I felt sick reading it. The anniversary party hadn't been Sterling's spontaneous romantic gesture. It had been planned as a deliberate humiliation. "There's more, Dad," Amelia said quietly. She scrolled to messages from just last week. "Jake's been asking questions about Sterling's business." "Tanya, I'm worried he's planning something." "Marta, let him try. I've got enough dirt on him to bury his reputation if he causes trouble. Remember that tax thing from 5 years ago, and the incident with Ross's friend, Tanya. You kept records of that. I keep records of everything." Insurance policy. I stared at the phone. Tanya had been collecting information about my family for years, building a file of secrets and mistakes she could use as weapons. The tax thing was a minor error on my return that I'd corrected immediately. The incident with Ross's friend was when I'd caught his buddy stealing from my shop and made him return the items instead of pressing charges. Neither was actually damaging, but in the right hands, they could be twisted into something ugly. "Dad, there's one more thing," Amelia said. "Look at this message from yesterday. Sterling's getting cold feet about the marriage. Says Jake's harassment at the gym and the negative reviews of his business are making him reconsider." Marta. "Don't worry. I'm meeting with him tonight to discuss our arrangement. He'll stay in line." Tanya. "What arrangement? You don't need to know the details. Just trust me. By this time tomorrow, Sterling will be completely committed to marrying you, and Jake will be out of the picture permanently." I handed the phone back to Amelia. "Where are they meeting?" "Sterling's house." "Dad, what are you going to do?" "I'm going to end this." Sterling's lakeside mansion was lit up like a casino when I arrived at 9 o'clock. I parked across the street and called Eddie. "I need a favor," I told him. "Bring your camera and meet me at Sterling's place. And Eddie, bring a few of the guys from the gym. This might get interesting." 20 minutes later, Eddie arrived with Tommy and Mike, two regulars from the gym who'd heard about my situation and weren't happy about how I'd been treated. "What's the plan, Jake?" Eddie asked. "We're going to crash a private meeting and find out what Tanya Walsh really wants." I'd noticed that Sterling never closed his curtains, probably because he lived on a private lake and thought no one could see in. We crept around to the back of the house and peered through the floor-to-ceiling windows. Sterling and Tanya were in his living room, but this wasn't a friendly business meeting. Tanya was pacing back and forth, gesturing angrily, while Sterling sat on his couch looking miserable. Eddie had brought a directional microphone he used for recording training sessions. We set it up near the window and listened. "Told you from the beginning what this would cost," Tanya was saying. "I delivered Marta exactly as promised. She left her husband. She's marrying you, and she's bringing her salary and her clean reputation to shore up your failing business." "The business isn't failing. Please, I've seen your books, remember? You're 3 months away from bankruptcy. The only thing keeping you afloat is the money you've been skimming from client accounts." Sterling's face went white. "You said you'd never mention that." "I said I'd keep quiet as long as you held up your end of the bargain. Marrying Marta, getting rid of Jake, paying me my consulting fee. $50,000 is too much, Tanya. I don't have that kind of cash." "Then find it. Because if you don't, I'll make sure the state attorney general's office gets very interested in your accounting practices. And I'll make sure Marta finds out that her wonderful new fiancé is embezzling from his own clients." I looked at Eddie, who was recording everything on his phone. This was better than I'd hoped. Tanya wasn't just Marta's friend. She was a blackmailer who'd orchestrated my wife's affair as part of some elaborate scheme. "What about Jake?" Sterling asked. "He's been causing problems." "Leave Jake to me. I've got enough information to destroy his reputation and his business." One anonymous tip to the IRS. A few rumors about stolen merchandise at his pawn shop. Maybe a suggestion that he's been inappropriate with female customers. By the time I'm done, no one in this town will want anything to do with him. And if that doesn't work, Tanya smiled coldly, then we'll have to get more creative. Accidents happen, especially to people who don't know when to quit. That was enough. I motioned to Eddie and the others, and we moved toward the front door. Sterling's front door was unlocked. Rich people in small towns never think they need security. We walked right in. "Evening, folks," I said as we entered the living room. "Hope we're not interrupting anything important." And Tanya spun around, her face going pale. Sterling jumped up from the couch, knocking over his drink. "What the hell are you doing in my house?" Sterling demanded. "Having a conversation," I said. "Eddie, are you getting this?" Eddie held up his phone, which was still recording. "Every word," and Tanya recovered quickly. "This is breaking and entering, Jake. I'm calling the police." "Go ahead," I said. "I'm sure they'd love to hear about your blackmail scheme and Sterling's embezzlement problem." Sterling's face crumpled. "How did you know about the client accounts?" "Lucky guess, but thank you for confirming it." And Tanya was backing toward the patio door, but Tommy and Mike had moved to block her exit. "You can't prove anything," she said. "Actually, I can." I pulled out Amelia's phone and played back some of the text messages. Amazing what people put in writing these days. For the first time since I'd known her, Tanya Walsh looked genuinely frightened. "What do you want?" Sterling asked. "I want the truth, all of it." starting with why Tanya here was so interested in breaking up my marriage. Tanya glanced around the room, looking for an escape route. Finding none, she sat down heavily in Sterling's expensive leather chair. Fine, she said. You want the truth? Your precious wife hired me to help her get rid of you. The room went silent. What? I said. 3 years ago, Marta came to me for advice. She was tired of being married to a nobody, tired of living in a middle-class house, tired of being associated with a pawn shop owner. She wanted out, but she was afraid of looking like the bad guy in a divorce. I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. So you arranged the affair. I introduced her to Sterling, encouraged the relationship, and helped her plan the perfect exit strategy. The anniversary party was her idea. She wanted to make sure everyone knew she was upgrading to a better life. And the blackmail. Tanya shrugged. That was just good business. Sterling needed Marta's money and reputation to save his company. I made it happen. I deserve to be compensated. Sterling was staring at her in horror. You're saying Marta planned all of this? Of course she did. Did you really think she fell in love with you? You're a means to an end. Money, status, a better lifestyle. Just like Jake was when she married him 25 years ago. The pieces were falling into place. Marta hadn't been seduced by Sterling. She'd been using him just as much as Tanya had been using both of them. There's just one problem with your plan, I said. What's that? Tanya asked. I smiled. You assumed I was too stupid to fight back. Eddie stopped recording and looked at me. So what happens now, Jake? I looked around the room at the three people who'd conspired to destroy my life. Sterling, the embezzling businessman who was desperate enough to let himself be blackmailed. Tanya, the manipulative schemer who'd turned friendship into a weapon. And somewhere across town, Marta, who'd thrown away 25 years of marriage because she was embarrassed by the man who'd given her everything. They'd wanted to humiliate me publicly, destroy my reputation, and drive me out of town. Time to return the favor. Now, I said, we're going to have some fun.